you have way more power and control than you think you do. And just like in the classroom, it's just a matter of gathering the knowledge that you need in order to have the impact and leverage that you want.
Welcome to the Teacher Money Show, the podcast dedicated to helping teachers navigate your unique financial challenges and unlock your financial superpowers. I'm your host, Sean Morgan, a full-time educator and personal financial coach and speaker. And I'm here to help every teacher, whether you are a seasoned teacher looking for fresh insights or a new educator navigating your first paycheck, to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life. I'm super excited to have Justin Pogue here on the show today. Justin is a real estate veteran, having developed and managed apartment complexes and using those secrets on the landlord side. Justin has developed rental secrets, some strategies that we can use to get a better deal on our personal rents. So, Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to be here.
Justin and I have known each other for a number of years now, and I'm just excited to finally get him on the show to talk about all of his great secrets for rents. So, just starting off, most people think that rent is non-negotiable, right? The price listed is the price you're going to pay. You seem to think that's not true. So, what kind of power does a tenant actually have to negotiate their rent?
Well, the first thing is to understand that landlords are essentially small business owners, and they've taken on the problems that small business owners have. So there are pressures and situations and issues that landlords are actually trying to deal with. Now, you may not be aware of those that are going on because they're not publicizing that, but they do have those pressures. They're trying to fill these apartments. They're trying to maintain the quality of life for the tenants that they already have. They want their life to be as easy as possible. And so many people have just been trained to be consumers. Like you walk into Walmart, you pick up something off the shelf, that's the price you pay. Nobody's haggling with the cashier over the price of their peanuts that day. But when it comes to actually renting an apartment, you are a market of one. So they're trying to get that apartment to fit your needs. So as you're having these discussions, let them know that you're looking at other apartment complexes. Let them know that, this apartment has most of the things that you need, but it may be lacking something. Have that conversation with them. Um, and that way you can start this negotiation process.
Right, so negotiation is a conversation. So you
Yes.
need to start a conversation. That's the first step.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that.
Yes.
So knowing that we have that power because they aren't marketing to everybody, they're marketing to a pretty small group of people that are going to want that
Well,
apartment complex.
it's the person who's in front of them at that moment. You are an opportunity to rent that space. And every moment that space stays vacant, they are losing money that they can never get back.
Okay,
So if
so
they don't rent it
even more so,
today,
you have power because like unless there's like six people right there, like saying, I want this apartment right now, you've got
yeah,
negotiating power.
yeah, chances are there's not going to be six people that are standing there at that moment. So you're the one who can take this apartment off of their plate. And another aspect to this is how long has that apartment been vacant? The longer that apartment has been vacant, the more excited they will be to rent that apartment and get it off of their plate. In fact, I've sat in meetings where apartment 34 has been vacant for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Every week we're talking about apartment 34. We really need apartment 34 to get off our plate so we can talk about something else, anything else than apartment 34. So the person who actually rents that apartment is now the hero of the next meeting. So these are some of the kind of things that are going on behind the scenes that most renters don't know about. So if you can rent apartment 34, even if it's at a slightly reduced price, you are now your property manager's hero.
So, um, just personal experience, I'm trying to rent a unit right now.
Hmm.
I just want it rented. I need it
Yes.
rented to be able to refinance this property in the next 2 months.
Yeah. And that
So I
brings up
have a strong motive to rent this thing. I'm not
Yeah,
going to go around advertising that, but if someone
exactly.
is going to negotiate with me, I will negotiate with this person because I want this place rented.
Yeah. And that brings up another point. A lot of renters don't understand that the value of the property as a whole is determined by the number of units that are rented and the amount that they're rented for. So if units are vacant from a bank standpoint or a lending standpoint, that reduces the value of the property. And in your situation, trying to refinance, that's not where you want to be.
Yeah. So just those are the kind of things that the landlord, whether it's a small time landlord or a large apartment complex, might be dealing with as they're going in. So
Yeah,
I love that just
absolutely.
knowing that you have some power, some pull, especially if you've noticed this property has been vacant. Like you can keep pulse on it. And if you notice that you've seen the same unit up for rent for a while, that might be a place to look.
Or actually, more to the point, you can ask which units do you have that have been vacant for 3 weeks or more, 4 weeks or more, because there's something called fair housing law. And by law, a property manager or a landlord cannot steer you towards or away from any particular property that you may ask about. So when you ask a direct question, like which properties do you have that have been vacant for 3 to 4 weeks, they have to give you a direct answer, and it needs to be truthful because if it's not, then they may run afoul of fair housing law.
Even better. You
Yeah.
don't even have to do all that work of tracking it. I was thinking you're going through all this, extra work. You just walk up and ask. That's great. Okay, so we're getting into practical tips already, but I want to like hone in on this.
Okay.
So, um, so we've got make sure like, just realize that you have the power. Ask about vacant units because the more they're vacant, the longer they're vacant, the more likely they are to want to rent it to you. What are some other things that people can look at to get a deal on their rent?
Here's the other thing. Don't assume that the internet knows everything. So, and people readily assume that the internet knows everything, but here's the problem. If you're looking at an apartment community and they may have 10 apartments that are vacant, they're only going to publicize three or four. They're not going to tell everybody about all the vacancy that they have at all times, which is why it's important to get back to that concept of asking. Because the internet doesn't know everything, especially when the information that you're seeking is closely held information by a small group of people. Um, so that's definitely one thing that's important. But there are other tactics that you can use, and not all tactics are going to work in all situations. But having a kind of a repertoire or a quiver of different tactics that you can use is extremely helpful. Um, so another interesting tactic is the length of the lease that you sign can impact whether you get a discount or not. So if you're in a situation where you can possibly, instead of signing a regular 12-month lease, sign one for 24 months, you may be able to get a discount or at least lock in this year's rate for next year as well. But it can also work the other way. So for example, if the landlords have a lot of leases expiring in say January, which is not a time when a lot of people want to move, you may actually sign a shorter lease that moves the lease expiration date to a time that's more closer to their liking, which would be like summer, late summer, early fall, something like that, and then get a discount for creating a lease for helping them create a lease that accommodates their situation.
Right. So I'm also, once again, I'm dealing with this right now. I'm trying to lease something in October, November. It's a
Hmm.
terrible time to want to lease. So when someone's asking me about month to month, I'm like, well, I don't really want month to month, but I can do like a 9 month lease because I
Hmm.
want it to, become vacant again in the summer when I'm going to be able to, find somebody very quickly as opposed to in October again. So
Hmm.
that's the type of thing that, negotiation wise just knowing that can be advantageous for you. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
and so you could say that, look, I will get you on track. You can offer me a discount until then, and then, maybe the you'd renegotiate the rate at that point, once that shorter lease.
Yes.
Okay, so you
Yes,
say, look,
because
in exchange for getting you on track again, can I get a discount, basically?
yeah, yeah. And once you, and then after that, after that initial lease period, even though it's shorter, you are now a known quantity. You have been in the rental unit for, let's say, 9 months. You've behaved in a certain way. I know how you're going to behave because how you behaved in that first 9 months is likely how you're going to behave going forward. So now, when it comes to renewal, now I'm looking at the situation of do I continue and make a deal with this particular individual again, or do I, roll the dice and see, what I get trying to rent to someone else? And most landlords would rather not roll the dice if they don't have to.
Or go through vacancy again, or turnover, right?
Yes.
Like, that's
Yes.
a huge cost. It costs, 2, 3 months worth of rent to flip a unit over often. That's depending on
Yeah.
how that unit was used, how long it takes to, get it filled again,
Hmm.
and all those kinds of things. So keeping someone at a discount is better than having to kick someone out and get a new person.
Absolutely. And you've also hit on another power that renters have because if you as the renter decide whether you are going to stay in the unit or leave, which also means you are in charge of, or not in charge of, but you're in control of whether the landlord has to endure vacancy costs, where they have to endure the maintenance costs, where they have to have people come in and clean up the unit and do the minor repairs and prepare that unit for the next renter. So you as the renter who's in that apartment is completely in control of whether the landlord has to incur those costs. And that's another source of power that renters have.
And let's say that the rent is $1,500, right,
Hmm.
for per month, and you know that it'll probably cost them about that much for vacancy. If you leave, it'll take them a month to get it and you rent it again, let alone anything else that pops up. You can
Hmm.
say, hey, if you give me a $100 a month discount, you're saving $300. You get to keep $300 in your pocket over the course of the year, and I get a cheaper rent. Like that could definitely be worth it to the landlord
Yeah.
because they're keeping more money and they know you're dependable already.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a great story that Kim Kiyosaki tells, the wife of Robert Kiyosaki, about the very first duplex that she bought. And this was years ago, and she's renting out each side for $325 a month. And the first lease period comes to an end, and she wants to raise the rent $25. So she sends out the letter. One of the renters moves out. It takes her 6 months to replace that renter. So not only has she lost the cost of preparing the unit and doing any repairs and cleaning, she's also lost 6 months of rent, which is $1,800, in exchange for getting an additional $25 a month of rent. Wasn't really the best trade-off. But this is it's a practical example of what landlords deal with on a regular basis.
Yeah, that makes total sense. They're like, as a landlord, everybody, I'm looking at this and going, yeah, makes sense to me. I would give a discount for these types of things. You've also mentioned like helping with maintenance on the property. Um,
Yes.
I do want to
Yes.
caveat this that this is the one that like makes me the most nervous as a landlord, because like I don't know how good you are at maintenance. But like I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
It depends on what we're specifically talking about maintaining. So, for example, it could be the installation of a kitchen faucet or bathroom faucet. It could be just maintaining the landscaping on the property, trimming hedges, mowing grass, that kind of thing. Um, So it really is dependent on what that person's skill set is and what they're capable of doing and what you're comfortable letting them do. Um, but this particular aspect is really useful for people who are self-managing landlords who don't live in the area where their property is. And that's happening more and more as parents leave property to their kids and they're like, well, we're trying to sell it and we can't sell it or for the price that we want, or we're just going to rent it and use it as income property and we'll split whatever profits come out among the kids. Um, but at least having a tenant who will assess a repair situation and say, this is specifically what's going on. This is what needs to be done. Even that alone is helpful. Because if you think about it from the landlord perspective, if the tenant calls and says plumbing broken, okay, now I gotta find three plumbers. I gotta send them out. Gotta make sure they have access to the property so that I can get three bids, minimum of three bids on whatever's wrong. And then I gotta choose one of those people. Then they have to go back onto the property and make that repair. If I already know what the problem actually is, I can be much more informed when I'm talking to those plumbers before they even go out there. Um, And this also brings up another situation that landlords deal with all the time. So I have a family friend who manages a 6 unit apartment building in San Francisco. She has a water heater that's large enough for all 6 units. The hot water goes out. She sends out two or three plumbers to go and make an assessment and give her a quote and all of that. The plumbers come back and say, well, it's going to cost you, you need to replace the water heater. It's going to cost you $8,000. We can schedule on these days. And she's like, well, the water heater just went out of warranty. So let me call the manufacturer and see what they say. The first question the manufacturer asked her was, what was the diagnostic code that the water heater gave on the display screen? And the plumbers never mentioned any kind of code to her. So the company was like, go out to the water heater, press these buttons, get the code, and tell us what it says. So she does that. Interestingly enough, it turns out that the code that pops up is related to a filter on the back of the water heater that needed to be replaced, and replacing that costs $200, which is what she did. Hot water problem solved, but it raises the situation of you call in these experts to repair things, but they are going to use their expertise mostly for their benefit and not necessarily for yours. So those
And
three
how expert
plumbers,
they are is not necessarily just because they have a piece of paper next to their license doesn't mean they're actually very expert. I've had many a expert that were not very expert. I mean, I had a plumber come out to replace a line at my place because the whole line was just shot. And I replaced it. I had to replace it again. And then this plumber came out and said, no, it's done wrong. And then I had another plumber out and said, yes, it's done right. Found out it was the city's problem the whole time. So I wasted like 10 grand. But like
wow.
it was, multiple people telling me this was the problem, that was the problem, this other thing was the problem. And it wasn't the problem the
Hmm.
whole time. Right.
Yeah. Like in your case, they don't really make any money if this is the city's problem.
Mhm.
Just like in the case of my family friend's situation, they make way more money if they get to replace the water heater than if they just replace this filter. So, in terms of hiring maintenance people, you got to kind of look at their motivations. And I've also learned that a lot of maintenance people have been trained on newer equipment, especially if they're younger, and they'd rather work on newer equipment than work on older equipment and figure out how the old equipment works to repair it. They'd rather just replace it and make more money doing that. Um, so that's just a little insight into what landlords are dealing with. So if you as a renter can actually describe the situation that's going on, um, and sometimes even help the landlord do a little bit of troubleshooting, then that can make it a lot easier for them to get the right for them to get the right professional out to the property to resolve the problem. So everybody's lives can move on a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, I mean, like for example, I've got a property. It's the same property that I'm talking about this whole time, by the way. It's my headache property. Uh, that I I was told like the entire plumbing is stopped up. Like you need to come like snake it out. It just had a whole bunch of hair in the drain that had
Hmm.
not gotten pulled out. Is really simple. And
Hmm.
if someone competent was there to just look inside the drain and be like, "That's disgusting," all you need to do is come yank some of the stuff out. I wouldn't have had to been like, oh, I need to go get my, all this stuff to come out and try and fix it. If they would had known, then I could have just brought
Yeah.
my pliers and pulled it out and it would have been done, right? So
Yeah.
it just having that competent person on hand is
Hmm.
would be a huge help, especially
Yeah.
like the larger the complex is, I'm sure, because you don't have to, as the landlord, drive out there or have your property management send somebody out there or, send someone out there to get a bid. And I've been starting getting told like they're going to start charging people to do the bids as well. And like, so like
Yeah.
it's costing them money every time there's one of those things just to go check it, let alone fixing it. So that is very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the kind of more foundationally what we're talking about here is changing the average renter mentality from the landlord is my enemy or adversary to the landlord and I are partners in creating this living space for me. And that shift in mindset is what is kind of what mentally allows a renter to really look at the situation from the standpoint of how can I help the landlord resolve this problem? How can I reduce the cost in this particular situation, whatever it happens to be? And then that becomes a tool for negotiation leverage when I talk to the landlord. Because it's like, remember that solve that plumbing problem, or remember that time when I did such and such, and I helped clean up the landscape or whatever. So those kinds of things then become leverage for conversations about rental amounts and moving the relationship forward.
Yeah, so I'm noticing that you're speaking pretty long term in most of these, right? Like
Hmm.
there are like, the initial things, but like if you're gonna rent somewhere, you're gonna rent there for a while specifically, you start to have a lot better leverage if you just build a stronger relationship with that landlord. When they really know you as a tenant, you can use that to make their life easier and therefore they'll compensate you for that and with lower
Yeah,
rent.
yeah. I mean, it's so typically the increase in the renewal rate for a property will be less than the increase that would happen if somebody moved out and then I'm renting to a new person because my risk level is higher. But interestingly enough, you're talking about like staying in rentals longer term. It benefits the renter to stay longer term in other ways too. So, for example, in accounting, there's this concept called useful life. So the paint and carpet in an apartment has a useful life. Paint is typically 2 years, carpet is about 5 years on average. And what that means is, let's say you have a budding Picasso who draws in crayon all over the wall in an apartment, and you've only been there for a year. So what that means is at the end of that first year, the landlord's going to take the cost of repainting from your security deposit, but not the entire cost, just the remaining year of the useful life of their paint that they were deprived of, quote unquote. Um, which means if you had stayed that second year, you wouldn't have been charged anything for having the paint redone because the useful life of the paint has been used up. Similar with carpet, although it's a longer period of time.
If you know that and they try and withhold that from your deposit, then you can negotiate that.
Exactly. You can have that conversation with them. And interestingly enough, the useful life of paint and carpet doesn't start when you move in. It starts when those items were installed.
Mhm.
So it may that clock may already be ticking before you even move in.
So then the
Um,
question might be to ask with that fair housing, when was the unit last updated with carpet and with paint and so forth?
right. And they should have records of when that happened, some kind of proof of when that, for example, when the carpet was installed. Because when you move out, if there's damage to the carpet, in many cases, the landlord will want to try and charge your security deposit for that. Now, in some cases, that's reasonable and acceptable, and in other cases, it's not. But knowing that date of installation gives you an idea of what is reasonable and what is not reasonable. And it can save you hundreds, if not thousands, when you move out.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Uh, we're just like kind of going off of a whole bunch of different practical tips here. Are there any others that we're missing? Any other practical tips for getting lower rent, or just a better housing situation in general when renting?
Yeah, so there's a couple that I would mention, especially for younger teachers who are kind of just getting started in their situation. They need to live in the school district. A lot of times these districts are expensive areas to live in. Um, So one kind of practical tip is instead of necessarily renting an entire apartment, you may actually rent a room in a home. And there are specific organizations in different cities that actually pair older people who are in their homes, who have the space, who want to rent rooms with who want to rent rooms to teachers and other young professionals. Um, the people who are living in the homes, they get somebody there to talk to, they get somebody there who can reach the things, on the higher shelf, maybe help them out with some house chores, that kind of thing. And in exchange, the individual renting the room gets to live in a house and make use of the entire house and the backyard, which quite frankly most apartments don't have. And they get to access that at a lower price point than they otherwise would. Um, so that's something that especially younger teachers can take advantage of. The other interesting tip to save money is the timing of when you're looking. And what I mean by that is typically asking rents are higher in July, August, September, and they're lower in say November, December, January, February. Um, Now, teachers listening to your podcast may be like, you know what? I got to get situated before school starts. Like, I don't have time to be dealing with all of this. But the benefit can be as much as 7% in terms of rent. So if we're going with that $1,500 number, your benefit could be somewhere in the neighborhood of $135 to $150, depending on what type of apartment you're looking for and what city you're in. So the idea is if there is any way that you can maybe stick it out for 2 or 3 months without getting into that apartment, you may be able to negotiate a lower price. Um, just another option to consider.
Maybe if you have to commute from farther away, or sometimes you can get like a room on Airbnb for a couple of months for relatively inexpensive, uh, to make bridge that gap. There's some ways to do that if you want to do that.
Yeah, yeah, but the whole idea here is we're just putting out options that people may be able to use in the situation that they're in. Not all these options will work for everybody, but at least it's good to know that these are possibilities that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Um, so I just want to make sure we're hitting like the most, important ones. I liked what you're talking about with teachers in high cost of living areas. and then
Hmm.
being partnered with an older person who has space. Are there any other tips you have specifically for the high cost of living situation where you're like, I need to be close to work, but it's just way too expensive there?
So there are some opportunities to obtain free rent in those high cost areas. Now, some of that, there are two types of free rent. There's free rent based on marketing, where a apartment complex will offer 6 weeks of free rent or 2 months of free rent as an incentive for someone to sign a lease. Um, so that's one type of free rent that does happen. And there are a number of areas where, like, specifically like Nashville and Austin, Texas come to mind right now, where those types of marketing offers are being made. Um, but and also here in Dallas too. But also, there's another interesting tactic, which is really good for people with young families. Um, if the teacher in question happens to be married, if their spouse took on the role of working for a property management company or the landlord for their particular property, and working for them they may take on things like making sure the property looks good, picking up trash and that kind of thing, doing some landscaping work, making sure the pool is clean, being the first point of contact for their neighbors when there's some kind of problem or maintenance issue that comes up, letting in vendors, that type of thing. Um, but there are opportunities a to get a free apartment or an apartment with greatly reduced rent if one of the people in that couple is taking on that responsibility. It also has the added benefit of that person is essentially working from home. So if they have a small child, they get to dodge childcare as well. But on top of all of that, whatever amount of free rent they're receiving is after tax money. So, for example, if you're renting, we'll keep with the $1,500 example, it's a $1,500 two-bedroom apartment, and you're not paying rent for that apartment. That's, 18 grand a year. But what would you have to earn from a job in order to have 18 grand a year after tax? You'd have to be closer to that 24, 27, maybe even 30, depending on where you're living. Plus the childcare cost on top of that. Um, so kind of thinking about it from that perspective, the value of that person staying home and working for the landlord is like 30K as far as the family is concerned. It's the equivalent of a 30K job outside the home. Um, but again, getting back to that mindset, a lot of renters don't think about it that way because the landlord is my adversary. Why am I working for them?
Yeah, I love that idea. I've actually been looking into that like as a potential almost side hustle. Like, they
Mhm.
often only ask for like, 10, 15 hours a week. And I've got maintenance experience from my own properties. Like, well, what
Mhm.
if I just, my wife and I maybe could tag team it because we have a young son, so we would like her to be able to stay home to raise him, so that way
Mhm.
we're not, farming him out to daycare.
Yeah.
But she's
Yeah,
working
so
right
in
now,
my
so
book,
that's
so in my book, Rental Secrets, I kind of talk about different stories about people who have used these different tactics and how landlords are affected by these different tactics and that kind of thing. Because these are real, these are real options, real things that people have used in the past, whether they're negotiating with me or other landlords that I know. This is all based on real world knowledge and experience. Um, and having been a landlord myself, that's how I know that each of these tactics has value and can be used, and landlords will respond to these offers or to these different offers and opportunities.
yeah, awesome. Okay. The next thing I want to ask you about is subleasing and like, having like a rental house hack type of a thing, is that even like possible? Like, do people do that?
House hacking is one of the best strategies for renting. Like if you're a young individual, you're trying to buy a house, um, and you want to house hack this situation, you can act if you have like signed agreements with other people for rooms, you can use that to qualify for loans on for a house. Like that is absolutely a real thing. And the bank will treat that as income for you when purchasing a property. All banks, not necessarily all banks, but many banks will look at that as additional income to you in terms of qualifying for this house and what dollar amounts you can qualify for and that kind of thing. Um,
So what I was asking though specifically is, are you able to do something similar while you're renting, or do you have to own the house?
you don't have to own. As a renter, what you will have are roommates. And that allows you to split the cost, that allows you to split the rental costs, that allows you to split the utilities and any other costs that are associated with this property. Um, and the now in the roommate situation, everybody's going to need to be on the lease and everybody's going to be responsible for the rent being paid. And the way the landlord looks at it is the responsibility is both joint and several, and those are legal terms. But what that means is each person individually is responsible for paying the rent, and they're responsible as a group. So if the landlord can't get a hold of one of you, then the landlord's going to ask for all of the rent from the one they can get a hold of, and then that person can go and talk to the other person. But the bottom line is, yes, you can absolutely split those rental costs and bring down the cost of living in some of these high rent areas. But that also raises the issue of if you're going to have a roommate, please be very specific with this person about what you'd like the rules to be in this living situation. Who's responsible for what? For example, usually there's a primary bedroom which is larger and has its own bathroom, and then there's a secondary bedroom that doesn't have its own bathroom. The bathroom is in the hall and also shared with guests. So in that example of the rent is 1,500, maybe one person, instead of splitting it down the middle, 750, maybe one person pays 900, the other person pays 600, or something like that to kind of compensate, but be very clear on what the arrangement is, not just the financial part, but who's going to wash the dishes, who's going to do the cooking, how are we going to handle groceries, like have those conversations up front. um that way it keeps down the friction and everybody's aware of how this is supposed to work before we sign the lease and get into a real contractual legal obligation.
Yeah, and I would add to that, since that joint and several piece, I wouldn't do this strategy if you can't cover the rent by yourself. I would use it as a way to reduce your payment, but if you had to kick that person out or they weren't paying, you had to like, have the landlord kick them out or whatever, you want to be able to not also have an eviction on your record, and also not get kicked out of
Yes.
the property. So that's my piece of advice. Like, don't use it to make it where like, oh, I can live here comfortably, or I can live over here and live comfortably with a roommate, but not if I don't have a
Hmm.
roommate. That's not the reason to use that. It's just a way to save, so that way you can then put more towards savings and investing in things like that, to make your living situation easier, but not to extend yourself further.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would second that.
Okay, I want us to start wrapping this all up, bringing everything together here. Um, I feel like the one thing that people are probably most worried about, though, is like, how do you actually do it? Like you're gonna feel
How do you
awkward.
actually have these
Yeah,
conversations?
like
How do
it's
you?
gonna be like, oh my goodness, I have to go talk to someone. Like I actually really have to like speak to a person, right? Like,
Mhm.
do you have any tips for like making yourself go out there and talk to somebody?
Um, it a lot of it really boils down to recognizing that you do have power in this conversation. Like you are where the value of the building comes from. You are where this property manager's salary comes from. You are where the profit and financial return that the landlord gets comes from. So you are not a passive, you do not have a passive role in this. You are the reason why all of this has been created. Um, so starting there with that mindset and that perspective, this you're also going in and you're talking to this is a person. They have problems, they have issues, they have concerns of their own, and they have problems and situations that they are also trying to avoid. This property manager in this office, they don't want to have to put out ads to rent this apartment going forward. They'd rather have you stay. They honestly they would rather have you stay in the apartment and keep paying the rent, as requested. Um, they are open to having this conversation. What they are not open to is people coming into their office and whining and complaining. So, and as having been a landlord, I've seen this. People have come in and they've complained about, oh, my rent is too high, da 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 da. Those from the landlord property management perspective, and this may seem a little cold, that's not their problem. But you moving out and me incurring vacancy and having to pay maintenance, now it's becoming my problem. Now you're speaking a language that I understand, and you're saying that there will be consequences and repercussions for me going forward. And now you're engaging this person in an actual dialogue about what's going on and what your situation is and why things are happening. Because quite honestly, this landlord there, and this is something that we didn't touch on and we should have. Every landlord is in competition with every other landlord, and they're competing against and their competition is any landlord who provides housing that fits your needs. But they don't really have a good handle on what your needs are, number one. And they don't really have a good handle on any properties kind of outside, their neighborhood that might also fit your needs. They don't have that information. So bring that information to them. Let them know that there is a property. I love this property. It's a half hour west of my job. But there's another property a half hour east of my job that's $150 or $200 less in rent. And I'm seriously considering that because of blah, 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 blah. You're bringing them information that they don't have. And you're letting them know that there are going to be some issues that they're going to have to deal with should you decide to move out. And it's not this generalized kind of whining kind of discussion. You're being very specific about what that situation is. And if that property manager doesn't have the power to make a deal with you, you've at least given them what they need to go and talk to their manager about your specific situation. And then that person may be able to make some kind of deal or concession.
Yeah, I love that. Basically, what I just heard there was there are problems. Your property manager has problems. Solve them, and you pay less rent.
Yes,
There we go.
yes.
Know what their
Just
problems are
like
and solve it.
people who solve problems get paid. Just like you're hungry, you go into a restaurant, they solve your problem, you pay them. The same principles apply to your property manager, your landlord, and that relationship.
I love it. All right. Is there any other tidbit that we haven't talked about that you'd want to bring up before we wrap up?
No, I think we've kind of covered a lot of it.
All right. Well, Justin, as we're wrapping up, then I've got two more questions for you that I ask
Okay.
all my guests. My first question is if a teacher's like, man, I really need to get this rental thing figured out, how can teachers connect with you to learn more about rental secrets?
So actually, they can check out the website at rentalsecrets.net. They can also feel free to send me an email with questions at justin@rentalsecrets.net. Um, and then actually on Facebook, Instagram, um, Twitter, and LinkedIn, I post a tip for renters every day. Different tips across all those social media platforms. And the handle is at Rental Secrets. And they can find those tips there.
Well, it sounds like you got the handle figured out. Some people don't have it, nicely across the board. That's great.
I didn't get it on Twitter. So on Twitter, I'm Rental Secret.
Oh, okay,
I
okay.
couldn't get the S, but
It's good to know.
we're close.
Maybe you'll be able to get it from them someday. All
Hmm.
right. Well, thank you, Justin, for coming on the show. My last question is the same question I ask everyone at the end. What is your number one tip for teachers to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life?
Absolutely. My tip would be you have way more power and control than you think you do. And just like in the classroom, it's just a matter of gathering the knowledge that you need in order to have the impact and leverage that you want in any given situation, whether it's renting, whether it's navigating getting pay raises as you gain seniority over time, or whether it's getting the other things in life. It's just a matter of tapping into the knowledge that you need.
I love it. Justin, thank you for coming on the show. This has been a ton of fun.
Oh, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Wow, that was a fantastic show. Thank you, Justin, so much for coming on the show and sharing rental secrets with us. Now, time for my Cliff Notes. Number one, just ask. If you need something, ask. Don't be afraid to just ask a question about the property to get more information, to be able to use that to potentially negotiate lower rent. Number two, understand the landlord's pain points and solve them. If you know what their pain point is and you solve it, they will most likely lower your rent. And if they don't, go find somebody else who will. Number three, build a partnership for your living space. Realize that the landlord is working with you to build a beautiful place for you to live. So don't view them as an enemy, view them as a partner, and you're working together to lower the costs. And if you lower the costs, they can lower your rent. Number four, I thought this was a great idea. Connecting with an older person who might need companionship, might need some help a little bit, but also is just, living in a house that's in an expensive area and it's way too big of a house, but they don't want to move because they've lived there forever, whatever. And you can just move in, take a room. This is, of course, probably best for someone who's single, but this allows you to live close to work, which allows you to reduce your commuting costs, and it's going to be cheaper rent, which is reducing your housing costs. It's two of the big three right there. That is a powerful way to save money. Number five, get free rent. Look for those marketing incentives when you're moving. Don't just take whatever you think is, the nicest or whatever, but try and find that best price with the free rent. I think that one's okay. I wouldn't choose a property just for the free rent. But if it's what you're looking for and it has free rent versus another one that doesn't, go with the free rent one for sure. And then working as a property manager for the complex, just being, boots on the ground can be worthwhile enough that you can either get free or reduced rent where you are living. And then uh, number six, this is similar to what I just said, but I want to reiterate this point because it's so true. The property managers have problems. You coming up and whining to them about your problems does not matter to them. Because if the property manager came up to you and whined about their problems, would you care? No. People care about their own problems. So instead of whining about your problems, show them that your problems are their problems, and then offer a solution that includes a reduced rent. So it's just coming back down to the idea of problems, solve them, get the benefit. And then lastly, number 7, you have more power than you think. I think this is really one of the biggest things I want to drive home. It's not really financial, uh, but if I can convince more people, more teachers, that the locus of control is in you, it's not in somebody else. You are the master of your fate. You are the captain of your soul, right? I think I switched those. But the point is that you have the power in you to make things happen. You have value in the rental situation, so you have more control than you think over the rent price. You can make it happen. You have power. Such a beautiful way to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life. Now, rental secrets is just one way that we can reduce our housing costs. One of the big 3, we're working towards frugal living, finding a way to live more frugally so we can save more money and so we can invest more money so we can buy our freedom. That's the whole goal here. But remember, as you're on this journey, you are already rich. Your wallet just needs to catch up. Remember, my next webinar, A Teacher's Financial PEMDAS for Guaranteed Success, is on December 9th at 7 p.m. Central Time. If you'd like to sign up, go to teachermoneyshow.com/webinar. I look forward to seeing you there. If you would like help on your personal financial situation, go to teachermoneyshow.com/coaching and you'll be able to find different ways that I can help you there. If you would like to participate in spreading this message of financial empowerment to teachers, I would encourage you to talk to your administrator or to your district level about going to seankmorgan.com to find more information there. And regardless of which one of those you need, please like and subscribe so that way we can spread the reach of this more. Leave a 5-star rating and review. That's going to help more teachers find this. And then turn around and tell a teacher friend. I really appreciate it. The contents of this podcast are informational in nature and are not legal or tax advice, and neither I nor my guests are engaged in the provision of legal, tax, or any other advice. You should not act upon this information without first seeking appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional.